Hello, my name is Darrell Robert Schoon, and on this program, on this show, I'm going to try and frame our economy in a different way, perhaps to make it a little more understandable. And the frame that I'm going to use to put it in a different focus, to convey really what's going on and really why we're in the situation that we're in, is the game that's always played between a cat and a mouse. All right? Now, in our metaphor of the cat and the mouse, I want you to be very clear, we're the mice. All right? And who's the cat? Well, there's only one cat, and the cat is the banker. All right? Now, in the traditional game played between cats and mouse, the game is over when the cat catches the mouse, sticks it in his mouth, and eats it. All right? The game of cat and mouse lasts only as long as until the cat ingests the mouse. Well, this game is a little bit different because the cat, being the banker, needs to keep the mice alive. And I'm sure you've all seen cats playing with mice. They chase them, they run after them, they wait with patience, and then they start going in for the kill. They toss them one way, they toss the other way. And the poor mouse, it's only a matter of time until its end has come. And at that point, when the cat decides the game is over, he opens his jaws, tosses in the mouse, chews him up, mouse is over, game's done. All right? Now, in the game of cat and mouse that we're playing today, I want you to realize that it's in the cat's interest to keep the mouse alive. Because once the mouse is dead, the game is over. Now, the mouse, being the banker, wants to keep the game going as long as possible. Because how does the cat live? What is the cat getting out of the game? If the cat isn't going to eat the mouse, then the cat wants to keep the game going as long as possible. So it's in the best interest of the cat that the mice don't die on him. Because it is a game that we're playing. And like I said at the beginning of this program, in the game, you and I are the mice. The cat is the banker. And it's in the best interest of the banker that the game goes on as long as possible. That's why. What makes this game different than the game of where the cat just eats the mouse and the game's over and is done and the cat's full? Because the cat, in our metaphor, in the game that we're playing, needs to keep the mice running around doing what mice do. Because in the game of modern economies, the cat makes money from the game itself. The cat introduces debt into the game, and as long as the mice are running around doing what mice do, the cat lives off the interest in the game. That's the real difference. And so I want to show you this game from the standpoint of the cat. Now, there's the cat. The cat has set up the game, the cat has made the rules, and the cat wants to grow fat off this wonderful game that it's made up. Now, how does a cat live? Well, the cat, being a banker, lives by charging interest. The cat, being a banker, lives by giving out loans. And the biggest mouse in the cat's game isn't you and I, individually. The biggest mouse in the cat's game involves you and I, but only collectively. The mouse that really turns that cat on, the mouse that pays that cat's bill, the mouse that keeps the cat in business is called a government. All right? Now, so the big mouse is really our daddy mouse. Okay? The mouse that you and I, business people, workers, I mean, in Marx's paradigm, the game is between the business people, the corporations, the people who have capital, the capitalists, and the workers. Well, I want to tell you That is a very short-sighted game. That's how it looks like to the workers. Because the workers work for people, business owners, capitalists, entrepreneurs, all right? And it's true that most entrepreneurs are trying to pay their workers as little as possible, but that's not always true. One very far-sighted entrepreneur, businessman named Henry Ford said, if my workers can't afford a car, I'm out of business. So what he did, much to the chagrin of all other business owners at the time, he decided to pay his workers a living wage where they could afford to buy his cars. Now, most of the people now are not entrepreneurs. They're merely minions. They're merely corporate governance people that it's their purpose as CEOs and CFOs and COOs to make sure that the people who work for the corporation get paid enough for them not to go to work for other corporations, but to pay them as little as possible so the profits accrue to the people who own the corporations, the shareholders. All right? That's the difference between today's businessman and Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a man of incredible vision, and he was unique among business owners. So what the cats want to do, though, the cat wants to keep the big mouse walking around and healthy enough and keep paying his taxes and the interest on it so the loans that the cat gives to that mouse are paid back. Because if you step back and look at it from the standpoint of the mouse, the cat lives by giving out loans and getting paid the interest on those loans. Well, who is his best customer? His best customer is not you, nor I, nor even the corporations that are out there borrowing huge amounts of money from the cat. The biggest customer of the cat is government. All right? And this has always been true since the beginning of modern capitalism. And modern capitalism was when actually the cat took over the kingdom. Okay? Before the cat took over the kingdom, it was the church, or it was the king, or it was royalty, or whoever else ran the game. Basically, church, king, royalty. When the cat made its move, it did a very shrewd thing. Because royalty needed money. Why did royalty need money? Well, royalty doesn't work. I mean, the king and the queen sat up there and they lived the fine life. Why? Well, they said this was God. God, it was, what was the Sun King, that we rule because God gave us the position to rule over you little twerps, all you people out there, working the field, all you people who unfortunately were born to a lesser station than I, and I being the king, well, hey, what's the difference? I'm king, you're not. You work and I get your stuff. I can get first chances your girlfriends, even your wives if I so think. And certainly I can take all your husbands when I want to go to war. All right? The king had it going for him until the cat came along. And the cat, who is the banker in this little parable, really made a clever move. Because before this happened, all the cat was a cat. At the end of the story, the cat turned the king into a mouse. That was an amazing switch in the story. And how he did it was this. How the cat made his move was this. The cat noticed that the king always needed money to fight his wars. So the cat came and he said, listen to the king, listen, I can give you all the money you need to pay off your debts and to fight your wars. And the king goes, how can you do that? And he didn't notice that he was talking to a cat. He thought he was talking to one of those bankers, one of those money lenders. And the money lender, in this case William Patterson, said to the king, oh yeah, you can do that. I can do this for you. I can pay off your debts and loan you as much money as you need. And the king goes, how are you going to do that? He says, well, you let me set up a bank. And I'm going to issue money. I'm going to issue loans. And this bank is going to loan you enough money to pay for your wars and to fight more wars. Well, King William owed a heck of a lot of money, and he certainly liked going to war, and this was a deal he couldn't refuse. So he told the guy sitting in front of him, William Patterson, the Scotsman, I'll do it. And at that moment, when he did it, William Patterson turned into a cat, and King William III turned into a mouse. At that very moment, the banker became the cat, and the king became a mouse. Now, not any mouse. He was the biggest mouse ever. And he got bigger and bigger. Why? Because the cat could loan him more money, and as long as the mouse, now the government of England, could pay off his debts and pay the interest on those loans, the cat was happy. The cat really didn't care what the mouse spent the money on. The cat only cared that he got paid back. The mouse, who used to be a king, was happy in the beginning because he now had as much money as he wanted to pay off his war debts and to fight his wars. Now, where did we go from here? Well, that mouse, called England, took over the world because he now had enough money to put the biggest navy in the world together. He could go over and take over every country around the world. This was called imperialism, by the way. I mean, if you're a student of history, they don't tell you the story of the cat and the mouse. They tell you that in nursery school, all right? They tell you that in kindergarten, which you can understand that. But by the time you get to high school and college and graduate school, they're no longer talking about the cat and the mouse game. They're talking about the kings, they're talking about history. But I want you to understand that's really cat and the mouse. And that's how the bankers became the cat and everybody else became the mouse. Now, the cat was really concerned about government. That was its biggest mouse. But when he could print the money, he loaned that money not only to the king, he loaned that money who? To business people, because they always needed money to stay in business. Now, business people didn't necessarily need the cat before in the way they were going to need them later. You had businesses for thousands of years that existed without the cat taking a bite out of everybody, without the cat turning everybody into a mouse. And they did this with various banking items. They did this with bills of lading. They did this with real bills doctrine. This was the cornerstone of free markets before the bankers took over the market. These were called real bills. And this is an esoteric statement right now because nobody understands what a real bill is. But I want to tell you, even when Adam Smith wrote that seminal work, Wealth of Nations, real bills were used by all commercial entities to create credit and to retire debt. Today, this is not done. Real bills have been shoved aside by the bankers because the bankers wanted to make money out of everything. The bankers wanted to turn everybody in the game into a mouse, and that's what they did. They've shoved everybody out. There's now a lot of mice, one cat, and the cat has been so successful that its biggest customer, governments, now look like they have AIDS. Because in truth, debt, which is a four-letter word, is like AIDS, another four-letter word. And like AIDS, debt is a wasting disease. Like AIDS is a wasting disease. AIDS eats away at the body's immune system because it preys, because the body has no defense against it, and it wastes away over time. This is exactly what happens to the mice. Over time, it wastes away. And what the cat never thought was the goddamn mouse was going to die from the debt. All right? The mouse liked to keep the cat up. The mouse going around like that, that's what the cat loved, all right? Because as long as the mice walked around, could live, breed, keep its thing going, the mouse was fat and happy, all right? Well, in this game of capitalism, which is really the name the cat gave to its debt-based way of indebting everybody, the cat became so successful that it got the wasting disease. And in the beginning of the cat's game, everybody is real happy. Because everybody's living on the loan. but the loan always turned into debt, and the debt, like AIDS, is a wasting disease. Now, in the beginning of the cat's game, what did we find out? That it was warfare that kept the cat being able to feed that mouse everything it wanted. Well, that lasted so long because what eventually happened is the mice or government decided that it's like a war. I want to explain to you here. Politics are like a war. All right. Now the banker, the cat, has no bias. There are cats. The part of the cat loves the war game because it's a steady flow of income. It can count on it. It can count on mankind's desire for war. That's a guy thing, you know. I mean, guys always. It's dominance. All right. I mean, it may be your cousin out there over in Hamburg, and you know him. You grew up. He's your mother's cousin's son, Frederick. All right, and you're William. And the truth is, Frederick and William are related, but Frederick's got a kingdom over there, and William can't keep his hands off it because he knows if he does nothing, old Frederick is going to come over and take away his kingdom. So what the bankers did is they did equal time. They loaned money to Frederick, to William, to everybody, because as long as they got paid back, and they were going to make sure they're going to get paid back, they were happy. And this was pretty much the history of capitalism until the mid-1900s. All right? Now, after World War I and World War II, the whole planet was in a state of decimation. All right? And a very strange thing happened. The mouse wasn't just male anymore. Because the men had to go away and fight the war and die, most of them died in the process, those female mice had to step in and get jobs too. All right? So now you had not only male mice doing things and producing income and getting loans, you had female mice out there. Mrs. Mouse, along with Mr. Mouse. Now, before Mrs. Mouse came along, the cat really made its money by loaning money to the governments, which spent it all on war. Well, with the rise of Mrs. Mouse goes, hey, you know, this borrowing money to kill each other is counterproductive. Our money would be much better spent if we borrowed the money and took care of people. Education, health, taking care of the infirm, the aged. All right? That's how Mrs. Mouse thinks. Well, Mrs. Mouse is married to Mr. Mouse. And Mr. Mouse goes, listen, lady, this money is a guy thing. It's meant for war. We've done it always this way. And Mrs. Mouse goes, screw you. You know? And before, Mr. Mouse used to go, whap, 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 get in your place, lady, I want dinner. Because Mr. Mouse was the one who brought in the food. He had the job. He paid the bills. Well, Mrs. Mouse paid the bills because he was doing what he was doing. But it was, quote, his money. But after World War II, Mrs. Mouse had a job. And she was bringing in money too. And Mr. Mouse couldn't go, whap, 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 lady, Mrs. Mouse, I'm going to spend it on war. Mrs. Mouse now had a say in the game. Or as they say, she had skin in the game. Mrs. Mouse now had to be listened to. So for the first time, Mr. Mouse had to go, shit. What do we got to spend it on? And Mr. Mouse didn't like it. As long as the war, as long as it was a bomb, as long as there was a weapon at the other end of the game, he was cool. But now Mrs. Mouse said, no, we got to start feeding people, take care of people. And it started the domestic dispute between Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse. Now the cat really didn't care. Okay, between all the cat cared about was the mouse took money from his loans and he got paid back. And now the mouse saw that there was a domestic dispute between the cat saw there was a dispute going on between Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse. So the cat decided, this is not good. I'm going to encourage them and tell them, hey, quit fighting. I'll loan you enough money so you can do both. And Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse looked at each other, and they weren't getting along now, because now she had a say in the deal, and they were sort of getting mad at each other. But they looked at each other and they said, "Do you hear what that cat said? Do you hear what that cat said? We can both do it. We can spend it on guns, and we can spend it on feeding people and take care of people. What the hell? We can just borrow more money to take care of everything." And that's what happened. The cat got his way, and the mice thought they got their way, but they didn't, because when they were both tapping the till, Mr. Mouse didn't spend less on guns to allow Mrs. Mouse to spend it on helping people. Mr. Mouse kept spending as much as he could on guns, and he had to cut Mrs. Mouse in on the deal. And so what happened is the cat saw these mice, and at first the cat goes, "Hey, this is cool. I'm making as much money as I can. I'm making even more money." Because now the mouse is borrowing more money to go to war and to take care of people. Before, the government was only a warfare state. For 200 years, governments were warfare. That's what they were for, to provide for the common defense. Not the common welfare, as it says in the Constitution, but the common defense. The common welfare was meant warfare. But after 1950, because women started working and paying taxes and going to work as much as men, all of a sudden they had a say in the deal, and they didn't like that nasty little game of kill me or I kill you. Their deal was, let's take care of each other. All right? Which may be a more noble cause. I don't care. I mean, I have my druthers. But really, it's a domestic dispute. And what happened is that the warfare state morphed into the war. It became bisexual. Right? Before, the state was unisexual. It was male. It was a warfare state. But after World War II, the modern government became a hybrid. It had to take care of Mrs. Mouse. And what's happened is now the wasting disease of debt is killing the mouse, and the male mouse is going, "It's all your fault. It's your fault we're in trouble. It's the entitlements. It's the welfare. It's the education. That's what's killing us." Well, the truth is, no. The Mr. Mouse is trying to blame it all on Mrs. Mouse. And I tell you, boys, it's all your fault, because none of you cared. Nobody was watching it, because the cat was going, "Hey, hey, hey, you can spend as much as you want." The cat was telling all of you that the pot was infinite, that you could borrow as much as you could to go to war, to help people, to send kids to college when tuition was $30,000 a year. Borrow it, borrow it, borrow it. There's enough for all. I mean, the cat was just encouraging Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse. And all of a sudden, in 2011, Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse are going, "Whoa, what's going on?" And the cat is going, "Don't worry, keep borrowing." But everybody knows there's something wrong. And all of a sudden, the warfare state is realizing, no, it hasn't realized it yet at all. Mr. Mouse still thinks he's the guy. Mr. Mouse doesn't even know he's a mouse, and the cat he's about to die from playing the cat's game. Mrs. Mouse, she's late to the party. She doesn't understand how this thing happened anyway. All of a sudden, she got to eat too. She got to do things too that she wanted to do. And she's going, "What the hell? You're blaming it all on me. It was you who was spending all the money in the first place, Mr. Mouse." Well, this is the story of Mr. Mouse, Mrs. Mouse, and the cat. And if we keep going, there's not going to be a cat, because the cat lives off of Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse. And either Mr. Mouse and Mrs. Mouse start getting along, it's history. And you know this thing about history, it always is going